All right, so you sent over all these lectures about emotions
Yeah.
from the same professor even.
Uh,
Seems like you're ready for a deep dive on this one, huh?
it's fascinating stuff.
Not just like how they feel, but how they work,
You're right.
how they shape us, even if we can like get any control over them.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
The professor really challenges some common ideas about emotions in these lectures.
Okay.
Like, we always think of them as these fleeting things that
Right.
just kind of happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
But he argues that they're much more than that.
Okay.
They involve judgments, strategies, even a connection to our sense of self.
So no more emotions are just feelings.
No,
We're getting into some serious mental gymnastics here.
we are.
And one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that emotions are actually judgments, not just a passive reaction,
Yeah.
but an active, even unconscious evaluation of the world around us.
You're picking up on one of the core concepts here.
Really?
It's more common than you think. Let's say you're feeling angry.
Mm.
It's not just because your heart rate's up.
Right.
It's because you've interpreted something as offensive or unjust.
Okay.
Your judgment about the situation is what creates that feeling of anger.
Mm.
The professor really hammers this home.
Does he use a certain phrase?
He does, actually. He says,
Okay.
emotions are judgments.
Emotions are judgments.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's kind of a shorthand to remind us how our minds are shaping our feelings.
Oh, so it's not just about what happened,
No.
but about how we perceive it.
Exactly.
This reminds me of that experiment from the 60s,
Oh, yeah.
the Schachter and Singer one,
Uh-huh.
where they injected people with adrenaline.
A classic.
Right.
So they injected people with adrenaline.
Yeah.
And then some they put in a playful environment.
Uh-huh.
Others in a situation that was meant to make them angry.
Oh, wow.
But everyone's body was basically doing the same thing.
Okay.
Adrenaline rush. But their emotional experience depended on how they interpreted that physical response.
Based on what was going on around them.
Exactly.
That's wild.
It is.
So, like, if my heart's racing,
Yeah.
am I excited or am I about to yell at someone?
Well,
It all depends on how I'm judging what's going on around me.
it really highlights how much agency we have, even if we don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just along for the ride.
Right.
We're actively shaping how we feel by how we judge the situation.
It's making me think about all those times I've been anxious before, like a big meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the meeting that's like inherently anxiety-provoking?
Yeah.
Or am I judging it that way based on my past experiences or expectations?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
And the professor would say the more aware you are of those judgments,
Okay.
the more power you have to shift them.
Wow.
And that leads us to another important point.
Okay.
Emotions aren't simply positive or negative.
Right.
It's way more complex than that.
Oh, yeah. I feel that way all the time.
You do?
Like, it's like trying to categorize music as just happy or sad.
Right.
There's a whole emotional spectrum
Exactly.
in music,
Yeah.
just like there is within us.
The professor challenges this simple categorization that we often use.
I see.
He points out that emotions are multidimensional.
Okay.
They involve judgments about ourselves, about the situation, and our relationship to it.
So even emotions we typically think of as negative, like anger,
Mm-hmm.
could have positive aspects,
They can.
depending on the context.
Right.
He uses the example of like righteous anger,
Yes.
like fighting for a cause you believe in.
That's a great example.
That anger can be motivating.
It can.
It can drive positive change.
Absolutely.
So then even love,
Yeah.
which we think of as like purely positive,
Mm-hmm.
can be painful or destructive at times.
Think about unrequited love or heartbreak.
Right.
Powerful emotional experiences that challenge that simple good versus bad framework.
I'm starting to see why these lectures are resonating with you.
Yeah.
It's like they're giving you a new language for understanding your own emotional responses.
It's about recognizing the complexity of
Yeah.
your own emotional experience.
Not just feeling them,
No.
but dissecting them.
It's about understanding the nuances.
Yeah.
And this complexity, the professor argues, suggests we have more agency than we think.
Okay.
He introduces this idea of emotions as strategies.
This is where it gets really interesting.
It is.
So we're not just passive passengers to our emotions.
Right.
He's suggesting that we can actually shape and cultivate our emotions for a better life.
It's like we cultivate virtues.
Okay, so that's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
Think about like controlling your anger.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about managing your outward behavior. It's about shaping the feeling itself.
Right.
Like the Stoics and Buddhists have practices for this.
Yeah.
For cultivating a sense of calm.
Yes.
Even when things are tough.
You can choose not to get swept away by the anger.
Even if you can't always choose the situation.
Yeah.
So it's that whole idea of respond, don't react.
Yeah.
We're not just at the mercy of our feelings.
No.
We can choose how we engage with them.
Exactly.
What are some other examples from the lectures of emotions as strategies?
He talks about love, too.
Okay.
He argues that even passionately committing to something we love is a choice we make.
It's not just something that happens to us.
Right. It's about cultivating that passion.
That engagement, that sense of meaning.
Exactly.
So it's not just I fall in love with my work and then I'm passionate.
No.
It's I choose to cultivate that love,
Yeah.
to commit to it even when things get tough.
It highlights the crucial role of the self in our emotional lives.
Right.
The professor argues that emotions are inherently self-involved,
Okay.
even when they seem to be focused on others.
Even when they seem to be focused on others.
Yes, they're deeply intertwined with our sense of self-esteem, our identity, our place in the world.
I can see that.
Think about pride.
Yeah.
It's clearly about how we evaluate ourselves.
Yeah.
But he makes this point that even anger seems to be directed at someone else.
Right.
Involves the judgment that someone has wronged us specifically.
It's about how we see ourselves
Yeah.
in relation to the situation.
He even argues that love,
Okay.
while focused on another person, still involves our evaluation of the relationship and how we fit within it.
So all emotions in some way
Yeah.
provide us with information about ourselves.
They're constantly giving us feedback
Okay.
about our relationship to ourselves and the world around us.
But sometimes that feedback's jumbled, right?
It can be.
It's noisy.
Yeah.
Hard to make sense of it.
That's where he brings in the importance of reflection.
Okay, so taking a step back
Yes.
from that whirlwind,
To gain some clarity.
even just counting to 10 when you're angry,
Yeah.
to create that space to understand the root of the emotion
Yeah.
and choose a different response.
It can be so powerful.
If you can catch yourself before you react, you have more choices about how to proceed.
Like choosing to respond thoughtfully.
Right.
Instead of just firing off that angry email.
And he offers an example with envy, too,
He does.
that you can catch yourself feeling envious
Right.
and then make a choice to focus on gratitude instead.
It's about developing that self-awareness.
Yeah.
Being able to hit that pause button.
To live more intentionally,
And authentically.
not just ruled by fleeting emotions.
That's where his deep dive into emotional experience gets really fascinating.
Okay.
He moves beyond that simple idea of emotions as just feelings
Okay.
and explores the very nature of what it means to have an emotional experience.
So we're going deeper than I feel happy or I feel sad.
Much deeper.
What does he say about this idea of emotional experience?
Well, he challenges this idea that feelings are just these indescribable, ineffable things.
Okay.
He argues that we can and should actually talk about our emotional experiences,
Okay.
break them down to understand their different components.
Okay.
And doing that reveals just how complex they really are.
So what are these components?
Yeah.
What's actually going on when we say, like, I'm experiencing fear or I'm experiencing joy?
He argues that emotional experiences involve a complex interplay of things.
Like what?
Bodily sensations, perceptions of the world, thoughts and reflections.
All woven together.
All woven together.
I could see that.
Yeah.
If I'm watching a scary movie, my heart might race. I might jump at a sudden noise.
Right, those are physical reactions.
But my experience of fear also includes my thoughts about what's happening on the screen.
Absolutely.
Maybe memories of other scary movies.
Yes.
Even my judgments about how good the movie is.
Exactly.
So it's not just a passive reaction to the movie.
It's not.
You're actively engaged.
You're bringing your whole self to that experience.
This is connecting back to that idea of emotions as judgments.
Uh-huh.
How our perceptions and interpretations are shaping our emotional reality.
That's a crucial point.
It also means that no two people will ever have the exact same emotional experience, even if they're watching the same scary movie.
That's key to understanding emotional intelligence. It's not about trying to fit our experiences into neat categories, but about recognizing their complexity.
And that's something that's deeply influenced by culture, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
The professor talks about how certain aspects of emotions might be universal,
Right.
like the basic physiological responses to fear or anger,
Like the fight or flight response.
but how those emotions are experienced, expressed,
Yeah.
even valued, can vary dramatically.
From culture to culture.
He gives an example of a study on gratitude.
He does.
They found significant differences in how American men, Israelis, and members of certain tribal groups experience and express gratitude.
That's right.
So even something as seeming universal as gratitude
Yeah.
can be expressed and understood differently.
Depending on your background.
What are some other examples of these cultural variations?
Well, he talks about display rules, which are basically cultural norms about how and when it's appropriate to express certain emotions.
Okay.
Like in some cultures, public displays of anger are frowned upon,
right?
While in others it might be seen as a sign of strength or authenticity.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that in my travels.
You have.
What's considered polite in one culture could be completely different in another.
It's like we all have these different emotional dialects.
Oh, I like that.
Even if we're speaking the same basic language of emotions.
And he says that these cultural differences go beyond just variations in expression.
They do.
They actually shape the way we experience and understand our emotions.
On a fundamental level.
On a fundamental level.
Yeah.
He uses the analogy of language and color perception.
He does.
How some languages have distinct terms for shades of blue.
Right.
That English speakers might just lump together as blue.
That's right. He says something similar happens with emotions. Our language and our culture give us a framework for understanding and labeling our emotional experiences.
So it's not just about how we express emotions.
No.
But about how we make sense of them, how we categorize and interpret them within our cultural context.
Precisely.
That's fascinating.
It is.
It makes me wonder if there are emotions that exist in some cultures but not in others.
That's a great question.
Is it?
One that researchers are still exploring.
Are there?
There are a few intriguing examples.
Okay.
Like the emotion of fago.
Fago.
In Ifalut culture.
And what is that?
It's this complex blend of compassion, sadness, and love.
Oh, wow.
Often experienced in response to someone who's suffering or in need.
So it's an emotion that combines elements of what we might consider separate emotions in Western culture.
Right.
Really highlights how our emotional landscape is shaped by our cultural context.
It does.
What I love about this perspective is that it challenges this idea that there's one right way to feel or express emotions.
What's considered appropriate or healthy in one culture. Right.
Might be completely different in another.
Yeah.
This cross-cultural perspective is essential for developing true emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I agree.
It encourages us to question our assumptions about emotions, how they should be expressed, how they relate to our sense of self.
It's like expanding the map of human experience, recognizing the incredible diversity of ways that people feel and relate to the world around them.
It is.
And it's a reminder that we're all just trying to make sense of this complex emotional landscape.
We are.
And speaking of navigating that landscape, the professor's final lecture dives into a topic that's often at the forefront of our minds.
Which is?
Happiness.
Happiness.
He takes on this elusive concept head on.
He does.
Asking what it truly means to live a happy and fulfilling life.
This is where things get really existential.
Yeah.
He moves beyond the simplistic idea of happiness as just feeling good all the time.
Okay.
He explores the role of emotions in our overall sense of well-being. So he's going deeper than that fleeting feeling of, I'm happy right now.
Much deeper.
What are some of the key insights he offers?
Well, he starts by revisiting Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia.
Which is a state of flourishing or living well.
So it's about more than just momentary pleasure.
Yes, it's about having a sense of purpose, meaning, and virtue.
Aligning your actions with your values.
Exactly.
Living a life that you feel is good and meaningful.
That's right.
So it's not about chasing after pleasure or avoiding pain.
Yeah.
It's about something deeper.
Something more substantial.
What role do emotions play in this idea of eudaimonia?
Well, the professor argues that true happiness isn't about avoiding difficult emotions or striving for some constant state of bliss.
Okay.
It's about living a passionate life filled with deep engagement, meaningful connections, and a commitment to values that resonate with your core self.
So it's about engaging with life fully,
Yeah.
not just seeking comfort or avoiding discomfort.
It's about being present for the whole experience.
With all its ups and downs.
Exactly.
I love that.
It's a powerful reframing.
It is.
And it requires a shift in perspective.
Okay.
One that the professor calls emotional integrity.
So we've talked about emotions as judgments.
Right.
Emotions as strategies. And now emotional integrity.
It's a key ingredient for happiness.
Well, what does he mean by that?
Well, he argues that emotional integrity is about aligning your emotions with your values.
Okay.
Acting in ways that feel authentic and true to yourself. Knowing your own emotional landscape and navigating it in a way that supports your well-being.
So it's not about denying or suppressing your emotion.
Yeah.
It's about understanding them, accepting them, and integrating them into a life that feels meaningful.
You got it.
Being honest with yourself about what you're feeling.
Yes.
Why you're feeling it. And how those feelings connect to your values and goals.
It's about being the captain of your own emotional ship.
I like that.
Choosing your course even when the seas get rough.
And he even brings in the idea of spirituality.
Hey.
He does.
Well, how does that fit in?
Well, he suggests that connecting to something larger than yourself can be a powerful source of strength and resilience.
Like what?
This could be religious faith, a sense of awe at the natural world, or a deep commitment to a cause you believe in.
So it's not about being religious in a traditional sense.
Not necessarily.
It's about finding something that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
That goes beyond your individual experience, that connects you to something bigger.
He argues that this sense of connection can help us navigate the ups and downs of life with greater perspective and resilience.
So far, these lectures are really challenging some of the common assumptions we have about emotions.
They are.
It's not just about feeling good or avoiding bad feelings.
It's much more than that.
It's about understanding that complexity.
Yeah.
Learning to navigate it skillfully. And ultimately using that understanding to live a life that feels authentic and meaningful.
You're getting it. But how do we actually do that?
Yeah.
Where do we even begin?
That's where the professor's discussion of the philosophical underpinnings of emotions becomes really relevant.
Right.
He delves into this fascinating debate between David Hume and Immanuel Kant.
Oh, two philosophical heavyweights.
Exactly, about the relationship between emotions and reason.
Ah, the classic battle of head versus heart.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How do their views on emotions differ?
Well, Hume famously argued that reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions. He believed that emotions are the driving force behind our actions, while reason is merely a tool for figuring out how to satisfy those desires.
So basically he's saying we're all just slaves to our feelings.
Well, it's not that simple.
Okay.
His point was that reason alone isn't enough to motivate us.
Oh.
We need emotions, desires, and values to give us direction and purpose.
So it's like having a powerful engine but no steering wheel.
I like that.
You might be able to go fast, but you won't get very far without knowing where you're going.
Exactly.
Now, Kant, on the other hand, took a very different view.
He did.
He argued that reason must have the power to motivate us.
That we're not just puppets to our passions.
Right.
He believed that ethics are a matter of reason alone.
Okay.
That we can and should act based on principles of right and wrong.
Regardless of our feelings.
Regardless of our feelings.
So Kant was all about logic and duty.
Yes.
While Hume was more about feelings and desires.
That's a good way to put it.
It's like two completely different operating systems for the human mind. But how do we reconcile these seemingly opposing views?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And it's one that's been debated by philosophers and psychologists for centuries.
Right.
The professor offers an interesting resolution to this dilemma, drawing on the work of neuroscientist Antonio Damasio.
Antonio Damasio.
Have you heard of him?
I'm not familiar with his work, but I'm all ears.
Okay, so Damasio studied patients who had damage to the parts of their brains responsible for processing emotions.
Interesting.
And what he found was fascinating.
What did he find?
These patients,
while
perfectly capable of logical reasoning, struggled to make even simple decisions.
Why would that be?
That's what's so surprising.
If they can think logically, wouldn't that make decision-making easier?
You'd think so, right? But Damasio concluded that they lacked the emotional weight, the sense of value and significance that's necessary to guide our choices.
So emotions are what give our choices meaning.
That's his argument.
So it's not about choosing between reason and emotion.
No.
It's about understanding how they work together.
Exactly.
It's like having a map and a compass.
Okay.
The map gives you the lay of the land, but the compass tells you which direction to go. You need both to reach your destination.
I love that analogy.
Me too.
And the professor argues that finding this balance, this harmonious interplay between head and heart is crucial for developing emotional intelligence.
So it's not about suppressing our emotions,
right,
trying to be completely rational all the time.
No, it's about understanding the information our emotions provide.
Okay.
And using that information to make choices that align with our values and goals.
And this brings us back to that idea of emotions as strategies.
It does.
We can learn to shape and cultivate our emotions, to use them as tools for living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Exactly.
It's like learning to play a musical instrument.
Oh, yeah.
At first, it might feel awkward and challenging.
It might.
But with practice and dedication, we can develop mastery and create something beautiful and harmonious.
And the professor points out how this idea of emotional cultivation has been central to ethical and spiritual traditions throughout history.
Oh, really?
He talks about the Stoics,
Okay.
who believed in controlling our emotions to achieve inner peace,
Right.
and the Buddhists,
Ah,
who emphasize compassion and mindfulness as paths to liberation from suffering.
I can see the connection there.
And he even mentions Aristotle,
Oh, wow.
who believed that happiness,
Mhm.
or eudaimonia,
Right.
is a result of cultivating virtuous character traits,
Including emotional virtues like courage and temperance.
including emotional virtues.
That's fascinating how these ancient philosophies are still relevant today.
They are.
They're all about finding ways to work with our emotions,
Yes.
to harness their power for good.
You got it.
But you raised an interesting point earlier
Yeah.
about the role of emotions in our collective experience.
Oh, right.
How do these individual insights about emotional intelligence
Yeah.
translate to a larger scale?
Hmm.
How do they shape our relationships with others, our communities,
Okay.
even our society as a whole?
That's a complex question.
It is.
And one that the professor only touches on briefly in these lectures.
Does he offer any clues?
He offers some intriguing hints.
Okay.
For example, he talks about Adam Smith,
Adam Smith.
the father of modern economics.
Now, Smith is usually associated with self-interest
Right?
and the free market.
Competition maximizing profits.
Yeah, though that's what I always thought.
But Smith actually believed that our capacity for empathy is fundamental to our moral compass.
Really?
He saw empathy as essential for a just and prosperous society.
That's surprising,
It is.
but I guess it makes sense.
It does.
We need to be able to understand and share the feelings of others
Yeah.
in order to cooperate and build a society that works for everyone.
Exactly.
And the professor suggests that understanding the role of emotions in our collective experience is essential for addressing some of the biggest challenges facing humanity today.
Like what?
Conflict, inequality, climate change.
Yes. They're all deeply intertwined with our emotional landscape, both individually and collectively.
So it's like our individual emotions have this ripple effect,
Yes.
shaping the emotional climate of our communities and our world.
It's like those chain reactions,
Okay.
where a small spark can ignite a massive explosion.
Wow.
Our individual emotions can have a ripple effect, influencing the emotions of others and ultimately shaping the emotional climate of our communities and our world.
That's a powerful image.
It is.
So if we want to create like a more peaceful world,
Yeah.
a more just world, a more compassionate world,
Mm-hmm.
it's not enough to just focus on our own individual emotional intelligence.
Right.
We need to think about how we can foster emotional intelligence on a collective level.
That's what the professor seems to be suggesting.
Does he?
He says that understanding this dynamic, this interplay between individual and collective emotions
Okay.
is crucial for addressing the complex challenges we're facing today.
Like what kinds of challenges?
Well, things like conflict,
Hmm.
inequality, the environmental crisis.
Oh, yeah.
They're all deeply intertwined with our emotional landscape, both individually and collectively.
So how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
How do we cultivate emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
not just within ourselves, but within our communities and our world?
It is a complex challenge.
It
The
is.
professor doesn't offer any easy answers, but he does suggest that education and awareness are key. He talks about the importance of teaching emotional literacy in schools, helping children develop the skills to recognize, understand, and manage their emotions effectively.
So start early.
Exactly.
If we can equip children with these emotional skills,
Yeah,
they'll be better prepared to navigate life,
right.
to build healthier relationships.
He also emphasizes the need for open and honest conversations about emotions
Okay.
in our families,
Yeah.
our communities, and our workplaces.
So creating a culture where emotions aren't seen as taboo
Exactly.
or something to be ashamed of,
It's about creating a space where we can talk about them openly and honestly.
instead of bottling things up
Right.
or pretending we're not affected by our emotions.
He suggests that this emotional openness can lead to greater understanding, empathy, and connection.
Which are ultimately the foundations for a healthy and thriving society.
All right.
It's like those beautiful coral reefs
Oh, yeah.
where individual organisms come together to create a vibrant and interconnected ecosystem.
Exactly.
By fostering emotional intelligence on an individual level,
Yeah.
we can contribute to a more emotionally intelligent society.
One that's more resilient, compassionate, and capable of meeting the challenges we face together.
That's a beautiful analogy.
It is.
It reminds us that emotional intelligence is not just a personal journey,
It's not.
but a collective responsibility.
It is.
But let's come back to this idea of cultural differences for a moment.
Okay.
We talked about how emotions can be experienced and expressed differently in different cultures.
Right.
And you mentioned that fascinating example of ame in Japanese culture.
I did.
It really got me thinking about how our cultural background shapes our understanding of emotions.
It does.
Are there any other examples of emotions that exist in some cultures but not in others?
The professor does offer a few more examples.
Okay, like what?
He mentions the concept of schadenfreude in German culture.
Schadenfreude.
Have you ever heard of that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Doesn't it have something to do with taking pleasure in the misfortune of others?
That's right.
Okay.
It's that feeling of secret satisfaction or amusement
Okay.
when someone else experiences a setback or failure.
Now, in Western cultures, this emotion is often seen as negative,
It is.
even a bit taboo.
We're not supposed to take pleasure in the suffering of others,
Right.
but in German culture, it's seen as a more complex emotion,
Oh, really?
one that can be understood in different contexts.
So even an emotion that seems negative on the surface can have different meanings and interpretations.
Depending on the cultural context.
I'm starting to see just how much our cultural background influences the way we perceive and understand emotions.
And this brings us back to the importance of emotional intelligence on a global scale.
It does.
If we want to create a more peaceful and interconnected world, we need to be able to understand and appreciate these cultural differences in emotional expression and experience.
It's about recognizing the richness and diversity of human experience. Understanding that there's no one right way to feel or express emotions.
Yeah.
It's about being open to learning from other cultures
Yeah.
and expanding our own understanding of what it means to be human.
It's about cultivating curiosity and compassion.
Instead of judgment and prejudice,
Exactly.
it's about building bridges of understanding across cultural divides.
It is.
But with all this talk about cultural differences,
Yeah.
we haven't really dug into how our emotions shape our understanding of who we are.
That's an important point.
How do our emotions influence our sense of self? And how does our sense of self, in turn, shape how we experience and express our emotions?
That's something I've been wondering about, too.
Have you?
It seems like emotions are not just these fleeting feelings that come and go.
Right.
They're woven into the very fabric of our being,
It seems like that.
shaping our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
The professor explores this connection
He does.
in detail in his lecture on emotions and the self.
That's right.
He starts by challenging this assumption that the self is this fixed, unchanging entity.
He suggests that the self is constantly evolving,
Okay.
constantly being shaped by our experiences, including our emotional experiences.
So it's not like we're born with a fully formed sense of self
No,
that stays the same throughout our lives.
it's not a static thing
We're constantly creating and recreating ourselves.
as we go through life.
And the professor argues that emotions play a vital role
They do.
in this process of self-creation.
They provide us with valuable feedback about our needs, our values, our boundaries,
Okay.
helping us define who we are and what matters to us.
It's like we're constantly gathering data about ourselves through our emotional experiences.
I like that.
Each emotion, each reaction is like a little piece of information that helps us refine our understanding of who we are.
It's like we're assembling a puzzle piece by piece.
I like that.
And those pieces are our emotional experiences,
And the more pieces we have, the clearer the picture becomes.
right?
But what about the pieces that are missing? Or the pieces that don't quite fit?
Yeah,
We've talked about those hidden emotions.
Right.
The ones that we might not even be aware of.
those unconscious
Do
emotions.
those play a role in shaping our sense of self, too?
The professor would say absolutely.
Would he?
Even those unconscious emotions, the ones we've buried deep within ourselves, are actively shaping our sense of self.
Wow.
They might manifest in ways that we don't fully understand,
Right.
but they're still there influencing our thoughts, behaviors, even our relationships.
So it's not enough to just focus on the emotions that are on the surface.
No.
We need to dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
Explore those hidden depths of our emotional landscape if we truly want to understand who we are.
He emphasizes the importance of becoming aware of these unconscious patterns,
Okay.
bringing them to light and understanding their impact on our lives.
Hmm.
He suggests that this process of uncovering those hidden emotions can be challenging,
How about it?
but ultimately it leads to greater self-understanding and a more authentic sense of self.
It makes me think of those archaeological digs,
Oh, yeah.
where they carefully excavate layers of history, revealing the hidden stories and secrets that have shaped a particular place.
It's like
Exploring our unconscious emotions is like that.
Yeah.
We're uncovering the hidden layers of our own personal history,
Exactly.
revealing the experiences that have shaped who we are today.
And just like with an archaeological dig,
Yeah.
the more we uncover, the more we understand the present.
We can start to see how our past experiences, even the ones we've tried to bury, are still influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Right.
This has given me a whole new perspective on self-discovery.
Is it?
It's not just about looking outward, it's about looking inward,
Yes.
exploring those hidden corners of our emotional landscape.
It's a journey of self-exploration.
It is.
But how does all of this play out in our relationships?
Right.
Do our unconscious emotions affect the way we connect with others?
That's a great question.
The professor addresses this directly in his discussion of attachment theory.
Okay.
He explains how our early childhood experiences shape our attachment styles,
Attachment styles.
which are basically patterns of relating to others that we develop in infancy and early childhood. And these patterns, often unconscious,
Yeah.
can have a profound impact on our relationships throughout our lives.
So even those earliest experiences of connection and love,
Yes.
or the lack thereof,
Can leave a lasting imprint on how we approach relationships.
it's like those early experiences create a template
We do.
for how we expect others to treat us
Right.
and how we behave in relationships.
Exactly.
And he discusses how these attachment styles can manifest in different ways.
He does.
He talks about secure attachment,
Oh.
where individuals feel comfortable with both intimacy and independence.
Yeah.
They can trust and rely on others while also maintaining a strong sense of self.
That sounds like the ideal.
It does, right?
It is often seen as the most healthy and stable attachment style. Okay.
But he contrasts this with insecure attachment styles,
Okay.
like anxious attachment.
Where individuals crave intimacy, but also fear abandonment.
They might be clingy
Okay.
or overly dependent in relationships, always worried about being rejected or left behind.
Always worried about being rejected or left behind.
That's a common pattern with anxious attachment.
And then there's avoidant attachment,
Yes.
where individuals feel uncomfortable with closeness and emotional vulnerability.
Right.
They might distance themselves from others or have difficulty forming lasting bonds
It's like they're trying to protect themselves from getting hurt.
by keeping people at a distance.
Exactly.
And these attachment styles, often unconscious,
right.
develop based on our early interactions with our caregivers.
That's the idea.
If our caregivers were consistently responsive and attuned to our needs, we're more likely to develop a secure attachment style.
But if those early experiences were characterized by inconsistency, neglect, or trauma,
We're more likely to develop an insecure attachment style.
it's fascinating how those early experiences can have such a lasting impact
They can.
on our relationships.
Yeah.
But the professor emphasizes that even though these patterns might be deeply ingrained,
Yeah.
they're not set in stone.
We can change.
We can change.
That's a message of hope, isn't it?
It is.
He suggests that therapy can be incredibly helpful in exploring those attachment patterns
Okay.
and developing new skills for building secure and fulfilling relationships.
So it's not about blaming our parents
Right.
or resigning ourselves to a lifetime of unhealthy relationships.
It's about understanding how our past has shaped us and then making conscious choices.
To create the kinds of relationships we want.
And the professor emphasizes that this is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about ongoing self-awareness, reflection, and a willingness to learn and grow
In our relationship.
in our relationship.
But as we wrap up our exploration of emotions and the self, I think it's important to zoom back out
Okay.
and consider the broader implications of all this.
The bigger picture.
Yeah, how do these individual and relational dynamics connect to the larger social and cultural landscape?
That's a great question.
It is.
It takes us to the heart of the interplay
Okay.
between individual emotions and collective experience.
So you're saying that emotions are not just personal feelings,
No.
but also social forces.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about how fear and anger can fuel conflict and division within a society,
Right.
or how hope and compassion can inspire collective action, leading to social change and progress.
So they can be a force for good,
They can.
as well as a force for
ill.
yeah, for ill.
Emotions are powerful drivers of human behavior, both individually and collectively.
Right.
And the professor argues that understanding this complex interplay between emotions and social systems is crucial for creating a more just compassionate and sustainable world.
So if we want to address issues like inequality, prejudice, violence,
Mm.
we need to understand the emotional forces that are at play.
Exactly.
How fear, anger, resentment, greed can fuel conflict and division.
They can drive us apart.
They can.
But we also need to understand
Okay.
how emotions like hope, compassion, and empathy can inspire cooperation, understanding, and positive change.
They can bring us together.
They can.
It's like those ripple effects we were talking about earlier.
Uh,
A single act of kindness
Yeah.
can ripple outward,
it can.
inspiring others to act with kindness.
Creating a cascade of positive emotional energy.
But the opposite is also true.
It is.
An act of cruelty can trigger a chain reaction
That negativity.
and violence.
That's why the professor emphasizes the importance of cultivating emotional intelligence, not just on an individual level,
Right.
but also on a collective level.
So what does that look like?
Well, he talks about creating social structures and institutions that support emotional well-being,
Okay.
that foster empathy and compassion, that promote understanding and cooperation.
It's a tall order.
It is.
But it's also an incredibly inspiring vision.
It's a vision of a world
Yeah.
where our emotions work for us,
Right.
not against us.
It makes you realize that our emotions are not just these private internal experiences. They have the power to shape the world around us,
They do.
for better or for worse.
And that realization is both empowering
It is.
and a bit daunting, isn't it?
It is a bit daunting.
But it also highlights the profound responsibility we have as individuals
Okay.
to cultivate our own emotional intelligence
Mhm.
and to contribute to a more emotionally intelligent world.
So as we wrap up our discussion of emotions in the self
Yeah.
and how it all connects to the broader social and cultural landscape, I'm wondering,
Okay.
where do we go from here?
That's a great question.
We've covered so much ground,
Yeah.
explored so many different facets of emotional experience.
But how do we translate all this knowledge into action?
Right.
How do we actually integrate these insights into our lives
Yeah.
and make a difference in the world? That's the key question, isn't it?
It is. How do we do that?
Well, the professor offers some practical suggestions throughout his lectures.
Does he?
He emphasizes the importance of developing self-awareness,
Okay.
paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without judgment.
So cultivating mindfulness,
Yes.
that ability to observe our inner experience,
Without getting swept away by it.
it's like becoming a skilled observer
Yeah.
of our own inner weather patterns.
Noticing the subtle shifts in mood,
Right.
the rise in storm clouds of anger,
The warm rays of joy.
the gentle breezes of contentment.
I like that a lot.
And he suggests that once we develop this awareness,
Okay.
we can start to make conscious choices
Huh.
about how we want to respond to our emotions.
Instead of reacting impulsively
Right.
or letting our emotions control us.
We can pause, reflect, and choose a response that aligns with our values and goals.
So it's like having a toolbox
Yeah.
filled with different emotional regulation strategies.
Exactly.
We can learn to use deep breathing to
Yes.
calm our nervous system,
Right.
exercise to release pent-up energy.
Journaling to process difficult emotions.
The key is to find what works best for us
That's right.
and to practice these skills regularly.
So they become second nature.
And he emphasizes that emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing our emotions or trying to be happy all the time.
It's about accepting the full spectrum
Okay.
of our emotional experience.
Allowing ourselves to feel both the joy and the sorrow,
Right.
the anger and the compassion.
Knowing that all of these emotions are part of what makes us human.
It's like those beautiful tapestries
Oh, yeah.
where different colored threads are woven together
To create this complex.
to create this complex and intricate design.
Our emotions, even the difficult ones,
Right.
add depth and richness to the fabric of our lives.
And the professor suggests that by embracing this wholeness,
Yeah.
this acceptance of our full emotional range
We can cultivate a deeper sense of peace, resilience, and compassion.
for ourselves and for others.
For ourselves and for others.
But cultivating emotional intelligence within ourselves
Yeah.
is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right. How do we apply this understanding to our relationships with others?
How can we use emotional intelligence to create more fulfilling and harmonious connections? That's a great question.
It is.
It seems like all these insights about emotions, understanding them as judgments, recognizing their connection to our sense of self,
Yeah.
learning to regulate them.
It all seems essential for building healthy and fulfilling relationships.
But how do we put it into practice?
The professor offers some valuable insights into this aspect of emotional intelligence.
Does he?
He emphasizes the importance of empathy.
Okay.
Being able to understand and share the feelings of others.
Empathy.
Yeah.
That ability to step into someone else's shoes and see the world through their eyes.
It sounds simple enough,
It does.
but I think it's one of the most challenging skills to cultivate.
I agree with that.
And the professor emphasizes that empathy isn't just about feeling sorry for someone or trying to fix their problems.
So it's not about jumping in with solutions.
No, it's about listening deeply,
Ah.
being present with their pain, and validating their emotional experience.
So creating a space
Yeah,
where the other person feels heard, understood, and supported,
exactly.
even if we don't have all the answers or solutions.
Sometimes just being there is enough.
It's about simply being present with them in their experience.
That's right.
And you're saying that empathy is a skill we can develop with practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It starts with being curious about the experiences of others, asking questions, and paying attention to both their verbal and nonverbal cues.
It's like becoming a skilled detective,
Yeah.
gathering clues
Piecing together the puzzle.
of another person's emotional experience.
But sometimes, even with the best intentions, communication can break down.
Right.
What about those times when we're struggling to connect with someone?
Yeah.
When a conversation feels difficult or strained?
How can we use emotional intelligence to navigate those challenging interpersonal dynamics?
That's a great question.
It is.
And it's one that many of us face in our relationships at some point.
For sure.
What does the professor say?
Well, he offers some valuable insights
Okay.
into how we can use emotional intelligence
Okay.
to navigate these difficult conversations.
Like what?
Well, for instance, he emphasizes the importance of self-regulation,
Okay.
being able to manage our own emotions.
Especially when things get heated or challenging.
Exactly.
So instead of reacting impulsively
Right.
or letting our emotions escalate the conflict,
We can take a step back
take a deep breath.
and choose a more skillful response.
But how do we do that when we're feeling overwhelmed by our own emotions?
The professor suggests that one of the most effective ways to regulate our emotions in these situations
Yeah.
is to focus on understanding the other person's perspective. Oh, so it's like those conflict resolution techniques
It is.
where we try to see the situation from the other person's point of view.
to understand their needs
Right.
and their motivations.
It's about shifting our focus away from our own emotional reaction and trying to see the situation through their eyes.
Understanding where they're coming from, even if we don't agree with them. Exactly.
Okay.
And the professor emphasizes that this doesn't mean we have to condone their behavior
Right.
or agree with their perspective.
But by making a genuine effort to understand their experience,
Yeah.
we can often de-escalate the conflict.
And find a more constructive way forward.
This is giving me a whole new perspective
Is it?
on how to approach difficult conversations.
It's not about winning or losing
It's not.
or proving who's right or wrong.
Right.
It's about creating a space for understanding.
And finding a solution that works for everyone involved.
That often requires a willingness to be vulnerable,
Okay.
to acknowledge our own emotions, and to communicate them in a way that's both honest and respectful.
This is incredibly insightful.
It is.
We've explored the power of empathy,
Yeah.
the importance of self-regulation,
Yeah.
the value of seeking to understand the other person's perspective.
Those are all key components of emotional intelligence.
But what about those times when we're feeling overwhelmed by our own emotions? When we're struggling to cope with stress,
Yeah.
anxiety, difficult life circumstances?
That's a question that's particularly relevant in today's world, isn't it?
It is.
We're bombarded with information and stimulation.
And the pace of life can feel relentless at times.
How can we use emotional intelligence
Right.
to cultivate resilience and well-being?
During those challenging times.
The professor offers some valuable insights into how we can use emotional intelligence
Okay.
to navigate these challenges
Right.
and cultivate a greater sense of resilience and well-being.
So it's not just about managing our emotions in our interactions with others.
No.
It's also about managing our emotions
When we're facing personal challenges.
and difficulties.
And one of the key strategies he emphasizes is self-care.
Self-care. That's a term we hear a lot these days.
We do.
But what does it actually look like in practice?
Well, he suggests that it's about making time for those activities that nourish and replenish us.
Like what kinds of activities?
Getting enough sleep, eating healthy foods, moving our bodies, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones.
Percent hobbies and interests that bring us joy.
Those are all forms of self-care.
And he emphasizes that self-care is not selfish.
It's not.
It's essential for our overall well-being.
And our ability to show up fully in our lives.
It's like those oxygen masks on airplanes,
Oh, yeah.
where we're instructed to put on our own mask first
Right.
before assisting others.
We can't pour from an empty cup.
We need to take care of ourselves in order to be able to give to others.
That's a great analogy.
And he suggests that self-care isn't just about indulging in luxurious spa treatments or escaping to exotic islands.
It's about making small but consistent choices throughout our day that support our well-being.
Like what kinds of choices?
Well, taking a few minutes to meditate,
Okay.
going for a walk during our lunch break, or simply taking a few deep breaths when we're feeling stressed.
Right.
These small acts of self-care can make a big difference.
In our overall resilience and well-being?
And he emphasizes that it's important to be kind and compassionate towards ourselves,
Okay.
especially when we're struggling.
We're all human.
We are.
We're all going to make mistakes.
The key is to learn from those mistakes.
Right.
And keep moving forward with self-compassion and a growth mindset.
So it's not about beating ourselves up when we
Yeah.
fall short.
We're all works in progress.
We are.
And that's okay.
We can learn and grow from our experiences.
Even the difficult ones.
This has been a wonderful exploration of how to use emotional intelligence
It has.
to cultivate resilience and well-being.
It really has.
We've learned about the importance of self-care,
Yeah.
the power of self-compassion,
Mm.
the value of a growth mindset.
It's a powerful combination.
But now I'm wondering,
Okay.
how do we apply these insights to our work lives?
That's an interesting question.
How can we use emotional intelligence to create more fulfilling
Yeah.
and productive work environments?
That's a great question.
It's one that's becoming increasingly important to today's workplace.
It is. The professor touches on this topic in his lecture on emotions and ethics.
Does he?
He argues that emotional intelligence is essential
Okay.
for ethical leadership and effective teamwork.
It makes sense.
It does.
If we're more aware of our own emotions
Right.
and the emotions of others,
We're better equipped to communicate effectively, build strong relationships, and create a more positive and productive work environment.
he talks about the importance of creating a workplace culture where emotions are valued and respected,
He does.
where people feel safe to express themselves authentically without fear of judgment or reprisal. That sounds like a dream workplace.
It
But it seems like it would require a major shift
would.
in how we think about work and emotions.
The professor suggests that this kind of emotionally intelligent workplace culture
Okay.
can lead to increased productivity, creativity, and innovation.
Makes sense.
It does.
When people feel safe and supported,
Yeah.
they're more likely to be engaged, motivated, and willing to take risks
And more likely to share their ideas.
and collaborate effectively.
Exactly.
And the professor emphasizes that creating this kind of culture starts with leaders
Right?
who are emotionally intelligent themselves.
Leaders who are able to model empathy, self-awareness, and effective communication.
It's like those ripple effects we were talking about earlier.
It's like those coaches who inspire their teams not just through their technical expertise, but through their passion, their empathy, and their ability to create a sense of shared purpose and connection.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the professor emphasizes that emotional intelligence in the workplace isn't just about leaders. It's about creating a culture where everyone feels empowered to develop their emotional intelligence, to communicate effectively, to build strong relationships, and to contribute their unique talents and perspectives.
So it's about fostering a sense of collective emotional intelligence, where everyone feels responsible for creating a positive and supportive work environment.
Exactly. And the professor suggests that this kind of workplace culture can not only lead to greater productivity and success, but also to a deeper sense of meaning and fulfillment for everyone involved.
It does.
It sounds like a win-win situation.
It does.
A more productive and fulfilling workplace, who wouldn't want that?
Us.
But as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm wondering, what are some key takeaways that we can carry with us as we continue on our journey of emotional growth and discovery? We've covered so much ground, from the science of emotions to the philosophy of happiness, and even the cultural tapestry of human experience.
It's been quite a journey.
It has.
And I think one of the most important takeaways is that emotions are not our enemies.
Okay.
They're not weaknesses to be suppressed or ignored. They're actually powerful sources of information and guidance. They offer us valuable insights into our needs, our values, and our place in the world.
We've really challenged that idea that emotions are somehow irrational or something to be controlled.
Right.
Instead, we've explored how they can be valuable tools
They can.
for understanding ourselves and navigating the world around us.
It's like those ancient maps that guided explorers to new lands and hidden treasures.
Hmm.
Our emotions can be our guides, leading us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
But sometimes those maps can be hard to read, right? That's
Yeah.
where self-awareness comes in.
Right.
The professor talks a lot about the importance of paying attention to our thoughts,
Yes.
feelings,
Yes.
and bodily sensations without judgment.
That's right.
So cultivating mindfulness.
That practice of mindfulness can help us become more attuned to our emotional landscape. We can begin to recognize the patterns and tendencies that shape our experience, those triggers that tend to send us into a spiral of reactivity.
It's like those weather forecasters who track storm systems and predict weather patterns.
Oh, I like that.
The more we understand our own inner emotional weather, the better equipped we are to navigate the storms and enjoy the sunny days.
Exactly. And as we develop greater self-awareness,
Yeah.
we can also start to cultivate those emotional regulation skills that allow us to respond to our emotions in a more skillful and intentional way. Instead of reacting impulsively or letting our emotions control us, we can pause, reflect, and choose a response that aligns with our values and goals.
It's like those skilled surfers who ride the waves with grace and ease, using their knowledge of the ocean and their physical skills to navigate the power of the surf.
And beautiful analogy.
They don't try to fight the wave.
No.
They work with them.
And as we become more adept at managing our own emotions, we can also become more attuned to the emotions of others. We can cultivate empathy and compassion, build stronger and more fulfilling relationships, and contribute to a more harmonious and interconnected world.
It all starts with understanding ourselves and then extending that understanding outward to the people around us and to the world as a whole.
I like that.
But as we wrap up this incredible deep dive,
Yeah.
I'm left with one final question.
What's that?
What about the role of emotional intelligence in shaping our collective future? How can we use this understanding to create a more just compassionate and sustainable world?
That's a powerful question to end on.
It is.
And it's one that challenges us to think beyond our individual experience and consider the collective impact of our emotions. Imagine a world where emotional literacy is taught in schools, where leaders prioritize empathy and compassion, where workplaces foster emotional well-being.
A world where communities embrace diversity and inclusion, and where our global interconnectedness is guided by a shared understanding of our common humanity.
That's a beautiful vision.
It is.
And it's a reminder that emotional intelligence is not just a personal journey, but a collective responsibility. By embracing the power of emotions and working together to create a more emotionally aware and compassionate world, we can unlock a world of possibilities for human flourishing and collective well-being.
This has been an incredible journey of exploration and discovery. We've delved into the fascinating world of emotions, uncovering their complexity, their power, and their profound impact on our lives and our world. We've learned that emotional intelligence is not just a nice-to-have quality, but an essential skill for thriving in the 21st century. And as we conclude this deep dive, I want to thank you for joining us on this journey and invite you to continue exploring the incredible power of emotions in your own life. Thank you for listening.